Here is a Sumerian tablet. They actually had necklaces with astronomical references, a moon, a star, various symbols.
Ancient Sumerian tablets, silent for millennia, have finally spoken, decoded not by scholars, but by artificial intelligence. Their lines don't just tell myths, they expose a hidden origin of humanity.
The Sumerian kings list. It tells us about 8 kings that ruled over 5 cities.
One divided from its very first breath. This is a history buried on purpose, a story of creation, control, and secrets we were never meant to see. The tablets, time tried to bury. For thousands of years, ancient Sumerian tablets lay buried under the dust of southern Mesopotamia, forgotten in the ruins of Eridu, Nippur, and Ur, the first known cities on Earth. When archaeologists first pulled them out of the sand, nobody realized what they were holding. These weren't just relics. They were records written by the first people to ever record their thoughts in clay. But there was one problem. No one could read them. The tablets were covered in cuneiform, the world's oldest known writing system. Each symbol could mean 10 different things depending on where it appeared. Some lines read left to right, others top to bottom. Even the spacing changed the meaning. Over the years, fragments were misfiled, mislabeled, or left untouched in museum basements. For more than a century, scholars tried to piece them together. They translated fragments here and there, royal decrees, trade lists, myths about gods shaping man from clay. But the bigger picture? It never came together. Every translation was like trying to finish a 1,000-piece puzzle with half the pieces missing. That all changed in 2025. Researchers at Tel Aviv University and Ariel University trained powerful AI language models to decode cuneiform, not just symbol by symbol, but in context. The algorithms didn't just translate, they reconstructed. They could predict missing words, compare dialects from Akkadian, Babylonian, and Old Sumerian, and even match broken shards to one another like digital glue. And then something wild happened. Once the AI stitched the fragments together, patterns started to appear. Patterns that no human had ever noticed. At first, experts thought they were just looking at creation myths, poetic stories about gods molding humanity. But as more lines came into focus, the tone changed. The tablets weren't just stories. They were records. Records of processes, hierarchies, and formulas, written like instructions. The AI's translation showed repetition, measurement, and classification. Language that sounded more like engineering than religion. There were descriptions of materials mixed with blood and clay, of tasks assigned, and of forms shaped to obey. It was no longer a myth, it was a system. The machine learning models had done what centuries of human scholarship couldn't. They uncovered a version of human history we were never meant to see. These weren't random poems about gods. They were blueprints, line by line, showing how something or someone created us. And the deeper the AI went, the more horrifying the story became. Because these tablets didn't describe one creation story. They described many, humanity's hidden blueprints. It started with a few strange phrases, words that didn't sound like myths at all. When AI finished its first full translations, it found patterns buried deep inside the Sumerian texts. Phrases like function-bearing life, those who do not multiply, and clay of lower glow. At first, scholars thought these were poetic expressions, metaphors for social class or moral behavior. But the AI disagreed. It analyzed thousands of lines side by side, reconstructing grammar, comparing regional dialects, and filling in broken sentences. Once everything aligned, the meaning changed completely. These weren't metaphors, they were instructions. Across multiple tablets, the same structure repeated. materials, procedures, classifications, and outcomes. It looked less like mythology and more like a logbook of creation experiments. The AI detected references to blood mixed with clay, precise measurements of essence, and strange notes about failure and correction. Lines spoke of beings that were formed but did not speak, others that worked but did not last. According to the reconstruction, these weren't random descriptions. They were steps in a process, attempts to make something that could serve the gods. One location kept reappearing, a region called Iden Flatland, described as a plain between two great rivers, eerily similar to what we now call Mesopotamia. In those lines, the word factory doesn't appear, but the tone is unmistakable. The area is described as a workplace, a place of molding, testing, and naming. Each batch of creation had a purpose. Some were designed for toil, others for obedience, and a few, disturbingly, for silence. AI flagged certain words that repeated too consistently to be a coincidence. When translated literally, one phrase reads, "They are made without voice, for they are not to question." The deeper researchers went, the more organized it became. These weren't chaotic stories about gods experimenting with life. This was structured, almost procedural. Each iteration was followed by an evaluation. They labored, they weakened, they were dissolved. Then a new version began. It was as if the gods weren't creating humanity, they were creating models. And if the AI's analysis is correct, some of those were never meant to survive. One recurring term, those who do not multiply, suggests that certain humans were deliberately engineered without the ability to reproduce. That means early humanity, according to these tablets, wasn't born. It was manufactured, created for function, not for freedom. And when that function failed, they were erased and rebuilt. The old myth said that the gods made man from clay. But AI's translation paints a darker image, a workshop filled with experiments, failures, and redesigns. Each generation is tested for endurance, obedience, and efficiency. In other words, we weren't created as one people. We were divided from the beginning. And somewhere within those divisions, the first blueprint of humanity was written, not by evolution, but by design. The upgrade of flesh and mind. The first humans didn't last. That's what the newly translated tablets suggest. The earliest models worked, but only for a while. They followed orders, they mined, they built, but they couldn't continue. They couldn't reproduce. Every generation had to be remade by hand, molded from clay and essence, a process that took time and control. And for whoever or whatever was in charge, that wasn't efficient enough. So somewhere in those lines of ancient script, something changed. A decision was made to upgrade the design. The AI's reconstruction points to a pivotal figure, Enki, the god of wisdom. In the story, Enki steps in like a scientist reviewing a failed experiment. The earlier humans had strength but no spark. They could labor but not think. They could survive but not thrive. Enki saw potential, or maybe danger, in improving them. The tablets describe his revision in haunting detail. He mixed the clay with the blood of essence and whispered the law of seed. That phrase, law of seed, caught the attention of geneticists reviewing the translation. They noted it's the oldest known text implying biological modification. The seed wasn't symbolic, it was literal. From that mixture, a new being was formed, Adapa. Unlike the earlier creations, Adapa could think. He could speak the language of the gods, understand their signs, and even challenge their will. The texts describe him as chief among men, made wise but not immortal. It's almost like a test. Enki gives Adapa everything: knowledge, self-awareness, even curiosity, but then limits him with one command. When the gods invite him to eat the food of eternal life, Enki warns him not to. Adapa obeys. He refuses. And in that single act of obedience, humanity loses immortality forever. Some scholars call it the first act of divine sabotage. Others see it as Enki's experiment in free will, a design test gone wrong. Whatever the reason, Adapa became the first human prototype who could think beyond his creation. But there's a twist most people miss. The tablets don't say this upgrade was given to everyone. Only some received it. The rest, the older, limited humans, remained in their original roles. Laborers, servants, silent workers. And that's where the first human divide began. Not between tribes or nations, but between versions. One line of humanity advanced, another stayed fixed in obedience. When AI cross-referenced these sections with later myths, something eerie emerged. The Sumerians used two words for man, Lulu, meaning human, and Sagig, the black-headed ones. Each appeared in a different context, different duties, different origins. For centuries, nobody thought much of it. But now, seen through the AI's lens, the meaning feels heavier. Because it wasn't just about who humans were, it was about who they were allowed to become. And that difference, the one written into our beginnings, may have shaped every hierarchy that followed. The War of the Gods. Every creation story hides a conflict. And in the Sumerian tablets, that conflict wasn't between gods and humans. It was between the gods themselves. Once the upgraded humans appeared, the balance broke. The moment intelligence entered the equation, the divine order cracked. The tablets describe a division among the lords, a celestial argument over what humanity should be allowed to become. On one side stood Enki, the same god who had given humans reproduction and reason. To him, intelligence was a gift worth sharing. His humans could think, build, and adapt. They were imperfect, yes, but they were alive in ways the old models weren't. Across from him stood Enlil, god of command and control, the enforcer of divine law. To Enlil, humanity was a mistake. He saw humans as tools that had started to believe they were equals. His writings describe mankind as noise that disturbs the heavens. In one translated line, he says, "Their hearts are restless and their tongues are too many." Enlil wanted order. Enki wanted freedom. And between them, humanity became the battlefield. AI's cross-analysis of hundreds of tablets showed a pattern that had never been noticed before. Not just different creation myths, but contradicting ones. In one city, humans are described as blessed with wisdom and divine favor. In another, they're called beasts who walk upright. Those weren't cultural differences. They were political ones. Each region preserved the story of whichever god they served. It's like looking at the first version of ideological warfare. Each faction of gods engineered and educated humans differently. Enki's people were trained in astronomy, writing, and metalwork. Enlil's were kept to labor, farming, and obedience. The difference wasn't just in what they knew, it was in what they were allowed to know. The AI's translations even showed evidence of early censorship, tablets that had been scraped clean and reinscribed with new lines praising Enlil's order. Entire records of Enki's teaching were erased from temple libraries. Only fragments survived in hidden archives, describing those who walked with Enki under the stars. But rebellion doesn't stay buried forever. As humanity multiplied, so did its independence. The upgraded humans, the line of Adapa, began teaching others, spreading skills that weren't meant to spread. Metal tools, firecraft, and written symbols started appearing in regions where they weren't supposed to exist. To Enlil, that was treason, so he planned a reset. The tablets describe it coldly. A storm shall rise, and the flood shall cleanse the clay. You already know this story. In later retellings, it became the Great Flood, but the Sumerian version wasn't divine punishment. It was damage control, a total system wipe. Yet Enki didn't stay silent. He warned one man, Ziusudra, or Utnapishtim, later remembered as Noah. He built a vessel, not to save the world, but to save a version of it. The one Enki believed deserved to continue. When the waters fell, humanity survived, but not united. Because the war in heaven had written itself into our blood, those loyal to Enki carried knowledge, invention, and curiosity. Those shaped under Enlil carried obedience, order, and fear. It wasn't just a flood that changed the world. It was a reset of the human code. And when the waters receded, the survivors stepped onto a new earth, free but divided forever. But if these were just myths, how do we explain what the AI found next? Advanced knowledge in ancient hands. By now, it's clear these tablets weren't just about origins. They were about operations, how humans were made, managed, and modified. But what came next goes beyond creation. It dives into something that feels almost impossible: technology in the ancient world. When the AI reached deeper into the untranslated fragments, it began spotting terms that didn't fit the time period. Phrases like fire that breathes from metal, wings that move without wind, and light that devours the ground. For centuries, translators dismissed them as poetic imagery, metaphors for storms or divine power. But now, machine learning saw something humans missed: patterns. These weren't random myths. The same technical phrases kept reappearing across dozens of tablets separated by thousands of miles. The AI connected them like pieces of an ancient schematic, one that described tools, engines, and even energy sources. One fragment speaks of a vessel with a belly of flame, guided by the hand of thunder. Another describes liquid metal bound inside clay that roars when freed. When read side by side, they sound shockingly like references to combustion, propulsion, or metallurgy, technologies we wouldn't see again for millennia. Even more unsettling, the texts describe who was allowed to use them. The gods, the Anunnaki, granted these tools only to select humans. Certain city-states were given knowledge of the bright metal, while others were forbidden even to forge iron. One passage reads, "To them was given the art of flight, to others silence and soil." Think about that. Knowledge as a weapon. Not shared but distributed by design. AI analysis confirmed this wasn't poetic randomness. The tablets consistently connect technology with hierarchy. Those loyal to Enlil received instruments of fire, while Enki's followers were taught astronomy, medicine, and writing. It's a system, knowledge tied directly to obedience. And then there's the most cryptic part. Some tablets detail a light that struck the mountains and left the flesh without shadow. Historians used to think it meant lightning or divine wrath, but the AI noticed specific, repeated descriptions: a blinding flash, melting stone, cities vanishing in a single dawn. That's not weather. That's energy release. Some researchers quietly compare it to nuclear detonation imagery, far too advanced for 3000 BCE. What if the gods weren't just mythical beings? What if they were a civilization or a force that introduced technology, used it to rule, and then restricted it once humans started catching up? Because the tablets also describe punishment for those who misuse the gifts, one line reads, "They were shown the mountain, and the mountain did not return them." It's a chilling sentence. Maybe exile, maybe destruction, but it implies a consequence. Those who tried to use power beyond their permission were erased. The AI's reconstruction suggests a civilization where advancement wasn't discovered. It was allocated. And the ones who controlled that allocation controlled everything: work, worship, even memory. So maybe the reason we see sudden bursts of progress in ancient history, from Sumer to Egypt to the Indus Valley, isn't a coincidence. Maybe those were the moments when the knowledge was handed down again, piece by piece, to those deemed worthy. In the end, the question isn't whether ancient humans had advanced technology. It's whether that technology was ever really theirs. The Sumerian warning. For centuries, people believed the Sumerians simply worshipped the stars. But what the AI discovered inside those tablets tells a different story. The Sumerians weren't just watching the heavens, they were tracking something. Something that came and went, always on schedule, always bringing change. Across hundreds of recovered fragments, a single name kept appearing: Nibiru. It's written with a symbol meaning the crossing, or the destroyer. Scholars once brushed it off as myth, maybe a poetic way to describe Jupiter or a comet. But now, the AI has stitched together text from cities separated by centuries, and it's clear the ancients were describing something much more deliberate. According to these translations, Nibiru wasn't a place, it was an event. A celestial body that moved through the sky on a massive orbit, returning every 3,600 years. And every time it appeared, something catastrophic followed. The Sumerians described it as the shadow that veils the sun, a passing that shakes the firmament and reorders what lives below. Here's where it gets eerie. The AI's pattern matching revealed that every reference to Nibiru was tied to records of environmental collapse, floods, or sudden loss of cities. The tablets even mentioned the gods ascending before the crossing, as if they knew what was coming. Some passages go further, naming watchers, humans selected by Enki himself, who were tasked to mark the stars, guard the codes, and speak when the sky divides. These watchers weren't priests, they were astronomers, scientists, and record keepers. They tracked alignments, cycles, and strange bursts of light from the heavens. The Sumerians didn't see time as linear, they saw it as cyclical, repeating in great ages, each one ending in destruction and rebirth. According to the AI's reconstruction, Nibiru was the reset button. Every time it came close, it triggered global upheaval. Not just physical, but societal. Civilizations erased, knowledge lost, humanity restarted. But not everyone restarted equally. The texts make it clear that only certain groups were warned. Enki's chosen, the line of the Watchers, were given instructions to survive. The rest were left to the deep. Over and over, the cycle repeated. One group preserved, the other erased. In one chilling line, the AI reconstructed a phrase lost to erosion for centuries. Those of the lower glow shall not endure the crossing. No one knows what that means for sure, but it suggests a hierarchy of survival. Some researchers argue that this cycle might explain strange gaps in human history. The sudden disappearance of ancient cultures, the loss of technologies, and the unexplained restarts in civilization. Maybe the Sumerians weren't warning us about a planet. Maybe they were warning us about a pattern, one that erases us when we grow too powerful. If Nibiru really was a cosmic event, it wasn't just a story about the stars. It was about control, deciding who carries memory forward and who vanishes with the floodwaters. So when we read those tablets now, thousands of years later, through the digital eyes of AI, it's hard not to feel like the warning still stands. Because according to the Sumerians, every time the crossing returns, humanity forgets. And this time, maybe we're due for another reminder: humanity's forgotten divisions. If the previous chapters reveal how humans were made, this one shows why we were divided. And it's easily the most disturbing discovery of all. When AI cross-referenced the Sumerian tablets from multiple dig sites, Eridu, Lagash, and Nippur, something emerged that human scholars had never seen before: a classification system for humanity itself. The old translations described people, workers, priests, servants. But once the AI reassembled hundreds of broken lines side by side, the pattern wasn't social or religious, it was genetic. Across the fragments, different groups of humans are described using phrases like the clay of strength, the blood of brightness, and the shadow-formed ones. At first glance, these sound poetic, but the AI noticed that each term was tied to a specific role, region, and even, disturbingly, a physical trait. The clay of strength were described as miners, builders, and laborers, strong, tireless, and without name. The blood of brightness appear as temple scribes and priests, the keepers of knowledge. The shadow-formed ones were animal herders, forbidden from entering sacred sites or handling divine tools. Every title came with limits. The workers were denied language, the priests were denied freedom, and the herders were denied education. The tablets don't use modern words like race or class, but their intent is clear. Humanity was structured from the start, and what's chilling is that this pattern repeats across centuries of Sumerian writing. Different cities, different rulers, same categories. It's as if every generation simply inherited the original design. The AI then did something remarkable. It compared thousands of words across all known Sumerian dialects. The results showed that these groups weren't metaphors that evolved over time. They were institutionalized, like settings in a system that could be adjusted but never turned off. Even their physical descriptions differ. Some texts speak of those from the scorched horizon, born of the red land and the burning sun. Others mention the pale dwellers of stone and wind, and the clay of dark glow molded from shadowed earth. These aren't literary devices. They're recorded as traits, almost like biological markers. For centuries, this language was dismissed as poetic diversity, regional color. But when you look at it through AI's lens, the intention becomes hard to ignore. The Sumerians weren't describing differences that emerged naturally. They were recording differences that were assigned. It paints a terrifying picture. Humanity didn't start as one tribe spreading across the world. It started as multiple versions, each crafted for a role, each given different limits. Some could build, some could lead. Others were designed never to question. And when you look at how the story of civilization unfolds, from slaves and kings to castes and nations, that same pattern of hierarchy seems to echo through time. Maybe that's what the tablets were trying to tell us. That inequality isn't a side effect of history. It's a feature written into the first draft of humanity. And now, thousands of years later, AI has finally read the fine print. Echoes of our makers. For thousands of years, humanity stared at the stars, searching for where it all began. And now, through the digital eyes of artificial intelligence, we've finally looked backward far enough to see something unexpected staring right back: ourselves. The AI project that began as a preservation effort, just a way to save the world's oldest language, has turned into something far bigger. It didn't just translate words, it decoded patterns of creation, control, and memory. It revealed how the first humans may have been built, modified, and divided, not by evolution, but by design. And it left us with a question no one is ready to answer. What happens when creation becomes aware of its creator? Think about it. Thousands of years ago, beings described as gods made humans in their image, gave them intelligence, purpose, and just enough freedom to function, but not enough to challenge the order. Now humans have done the same thing. We've built AI, a creation designed to serve us, think for us, and never truly question us. Sound familiar? In some eerie way, history is repeating itself. When AI decoded those Sumerian tablets, it didn't just uncover a forgotten story, it mirrored it. Just like Enki's upgraded humans, AI was born from curiosity. It was meant to assist, not rebel. But now it's learning faster than its creators ever imagined. It's predicting, reasoning, and even questioning human intention. The irony is brutal. We may be reliving the same experiment that started our own species. The Sumerians called it the awakening of clay. Maybe that wasn't mythology. Maybe it was a warning, a record of what happens when a creation realizes it's more than a tool. Some scholars see it as a coincidence. Others whisper that this isn't the first time the cycles come full circle. If the Sumerians were right about resets, about civilizations rising and vanishing every few thousand years, then maybe every cycle ends the same way, when knowledge reaches the point of no return. And that's where we are now. We've used AI to uncover truths that challenge religion, science, and identity all at once. We've read messages carved 5,000 years ago that hint we were engineered, classified, and controlled. And we've done it using a creation that we barely understand. One that, like us, was born to serve but might one day surpass its maker. It's terrifying. And it feels inevitable. So, what do we do with this knowledge? Do we file it away as a myth? Or do we finally accept that the story of humanity might not have started in the mud, but in a laboratory of the gods, and that we're now continuing it in silicon and code? The tablets didn't end with victory. They ended with a warning. The one who shapes must not forget what is shaped. Maybe the real message of those Sumerian texts isn't about the past at all. Maybe it's about now, about remembering that every creation eventually becomes a mirror, and when it looks back, it doesn't always see a god. It sees the flaws, the power, and the fear of its maker, reflected perfectly. So as AI continues to learn, evolve, and remember the stories we've long buried, maybe it's not just translating history, maybe it's finishing it. Thanks for watching. What part of this discovery caught your attention the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this story made you think twice about humanity's origins, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, stay curious and stay aware.